Welcome to the Psychedelic Mom podcast. I am here today with Stuart Adams. And if you missed my first episode with Stuart, go back and listen. It is riveting. It's about Stuart's journey from heroin addict to healer and how he works with plants and now helps other people with tobacco addiction and other addictions. And he is back today to talk about what's new for him and some of his new work. And I also have Stefanie Cohen with me today, who is my colleague, who I work with. And I brought Stefanie to another interview that you might have listened to with Dr. Angelo DeLullo, who is a non-dual teacher. So the three of us are here today to just kind of enjoy each other, have an interesting conversation about what's new for Stuart. And Stefanie is also a client of Stuart, so we might get a perspective of what it's like to work with Stuart and what she's learned personally. So I told you both that I feel a little lazy today, so I'm going to have you both just highlight a little bit about yourselves. I would love that. So Stuart, why don't you start by just, if anybody didn't listen to that first episode, tell us what your work is and how you're doing today.
Hi, I'm Stuart Adam. How are you? Nice to meet you all. So what do I do? I work with plants. I have been in deep study with plants, especially like plants like ayahuasca and peyote and San Pedro. And so I did a lot of deep study with these plants, but now I'm also studying with much more subtle plants like blue lotus and rose. I also work with tobacco. But really what I've been doing lately is really a deep study of prayer and how prayer works and how to work with prayer and co-creation with plants and elements, and also a deep study of alchemy and recognizing a more fine-tuned way of operating. So one of the things I realized is that shamanism is essentially like breaking apart patterns, and alchemy is kind of the fine-tunement of the aftermath of that. So these are the kind of things that I've been working on. Yeah.
Wow, very cool. I'm excited to learn about that.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Stefanie Cohen, and I listened to Michaela's podcast with Stuart and called him a week later, so which has been really awesome. And I am a former journalist. I worked for the New York Post for many years and the Wall Street Journal, and then made my way. I'll also share that I was on a lot of antidepressants and a lot of the Western sort of medicines that are given for depression and anxiety, and they just didn't work. And so it took me many years to really acknowledge that. And I made my way to the plant medicine underground healing world and found the healing that I was looking for, and so much more. And have since, left New York and now live up in the woods and work as a healer myself now. And took my interest in journalism, which was focused on New York City and nightlife and the court systems and all those, very material things, and moved it to a real curiosity and kind of obsession with consciousness and the psyche and healing, and honestly, really the true nature of reality is what I'm after. So It's fun to be here with you too.
I think we all are,
Yeah.
right?
What does it all mean?
What does it all mean? Yeah. So, and one of the things I think maybe I'll just start with is when Stuart, you and I were talking before, and we were talking about the different aspects of medicine space and shadow and light. Just that the kind of the original wound that we're all seeking is that idea of separation, that we are separate. That there's this separation, that we are all kind of that consciousness that feels that, trying to dissolve that in many ways. And earth medicines can definitely do it, as well as the subtle plants. And the alchemy of what you're talking about, your new kind of idea of alchemy, I love what you were just talking about.
From studying shamanism, what I've discovered is that what it really is great for is breaking up patterns, like breaking up old pathways. And what I've been discovering is, in study of alchemy is like polishing the stone. So it's about becoming more precision on how you're operating after you break up the old patterns. So this is something that I've been really in deep study with, and how do you do that? That's an interesting question. Like I said, everything I do is through the process of prayer. So if there's something that I want to connect to, I just start a prayer. And, what I mean by prayer is, a direct connection to source, So, let's say I want guidance into alchemical teachings or alchemical initiations. I'll get into a committed, commanding position on that. And I'll just like lay that down every day and connect to it. And I'll pray with the water and I'll pray with the fire and I'll work with the plants, And recently, which was been very interesting, is I started working with some texts. So I started connecting to some books, which is something that's very outside the ordinary for me. I'm kind of dyslexic, so I don't read that much, not a big reader. But I felt it was important to connect to some of the old information around alchemy because it's a field, which is what I just learned about. So essentially, this book came to me.
And can you say what the title is?
It's called The Emerald Tablet: Alchemy for Personal Transformation. Now, the Emerald Tablets were these emerald tablets that were created by a character from Atlantean called Thoth. And they're these, no one quite knows where they are right now, but they're very powerful teachings around, the nature of life and the laws of life, like as above, so below. There's many of them. So essentially what I've been doing is I started studying this book. And then inside this book, there's like stages of alchemy. There's all these different stages of alchemy. And I started studying them. And I realized that I had gone through a few of them and I wanted to experience some of these other stages. So what I started doing is what I would do is I would read the chapter and then pray with it and then pray with the book. And then I would do a ceremony where I would take some plant medicines and literally from the reading of it and the prayer to get there in the medicine space, I would have the experience of those specific initiations.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Some things to, just pull threads on there. First of all, Thoth. And I just love saying this. So I'm just curious, is Thoth considered to be Hermes Trismegistus?
Yes.
Okay, I just had to say that because I love that.
That's the Thoth. So Thoth, that's he was started there, then he became Hermes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, so he's reincarnated many times.
So and Hermes Trismegistus is the founder of the Hermetic teachings.
Yes.
That's where Hermeticism comes from.
Yes. Yeah, it actually comes from Thoth.
Okay.
So the Hermetic teachings were actually created on the Emerald Tablets first, which he created, which he is Hermes also. Mm-hmm. So
and Hermeticism was started way later from when they lived, though, right?
Yeah.
But there were these Hermetic principles: so within, so without, as above, so below, and these laws.
And all these
exactly, law of correspondence. Okay, so. You first started with patterns, and all three of us are familiar with trying to break patterns, right?
Yeah, right.
You were breaking addiction patterns.
Many other patterns,
many other patterns of being, right?
Yeah.
So first, it started with breaking patterns. When you went into that book, and you started looking at like alchemy, they talked about the changing from, a metal to gold, right?
Yeah.
But really, alchemy was really about the soul.
A base metal. So that could be considered within yourself as also.
Right.
So like there's correlations to different metals within your chakra system. So there's that relation. I don't have them all memorized. I'm just like really dabbing. And so the metal, so it's about making the base metal like lead into gold. So going up. So lead is at the bottom, gold is at the top, like of your chakra system, And so there's a pathway to going through this process, and it's there's like 7 stages of it,
Very interesting.
Yeah.
So lead could be like an addiction, and you're transmuting that addiction into some other higher way of being in life.
Yeah, I think it's more like base personality, base, denser ideology or denser understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean?
Okay.
Or
Okay.
basically your mind, body, spirit complex, the densest version of it. You know what I mean?
Got
And
it.
as we're learning how to evolve, we're raising in our consciousness. We're turning into like lighter metals, more polished metals as we go up the spectrum.
More
Yeah,
connected to the spirit world, the unseen, and just higher
yeah, yeah.
vibrationally.
Well, its idea is that you heal the below chakras, the below and then what happens once you get up to a certain point, then when you start connecting to the above, and then you bring the above into the below, and then you have both. So that's the idea behind it. Like I'm not really good at talking about this stuff so much yet. As far as like I'm still learning how to like put words to it. But what I am having is very deep experiences with certain things that are happening in these books, and as I'm reading these books, they're actually becoming reality in my day to day. It's very hard. So what I'm learning about is how once you take an interest in alchemy starts taking an interest in you. And I
Interesting.
find it's the art of fine tunement. Like it's fine tuning your journey to enlightenment. So it's like it's not just about like being lost in like the abyss of the infinite. You're choosing initiatory processes. You're praying for them. You're connecting through your prayers. You're in co-creation of your evolution. Yeah.
That's so beautiful. Okay. So I know it's hard to talk about because a lot of times, like the unbound is just hard to talk about. And the process of growth as an individual human being is really hard to put into language.
Yeah. Yeah.
Could you try? You said you opened up the book and you saw, like, when you looked into the book, you were like, wow, these are things that I noticed in my own evolution, I transcended. And now I'm working maybe here.
Right.
What was that experience like? Like, what's a particular thing that you read in the book that you worked with, that you prayed on, that you are currently in co-creation with right now?
I'll give you one that's not actually. All right. So I'm going to actually give you a different one right now. This is very interesting. So there's a book called The Red Lion. I don't know if you've heard of it.
I have
This
not.
book is very powerful text. It's a journey of an alchemist, right? It was written by this Hungarian woman. So I mean, this is this book is it's a magical text. It's definitely, if you read it, it's going to open up some stuff for you. It's really about the depths of shadow work and how shadow work is actually a part of the evolution. It's not
Yeah.
something to like, so like the bad things that, it's like, we've been groomed to like, oh, you do bad things and bad things happen to you and it's bad to do bad things. And in this book, in this text, it talks about just the journey from doing things that were not in alignment because you were not aware enough. And then coming to awareness and becoming enlightened through the journey. So it just talks about the journey. So at the very end of this book, essentially, this guy went through this whole journey. I'd probably be good if you read it. I don't want to talk too much about it. But at the very end, there's this chapter called the Kyla Core. Okay, the Kyla Core. Basically, Saint Germain is in this book. Saint Germain is this very, I'm sure you've heard of him before. He's a powerful alchemist that lived for like thousands of years, and people have seen him in different years. Anyway, so he was in this book, and he's training this guy who's gone through this huge journey to get to this point to be the alchemist. And he brings him to this statue, and he says to the alchemist, he says, the alchemist in training goes, you have to bring this statue to life, right? As a part of his journey, right? So he works for years to bring this statue to life, and he brings it to life, and he didn't realize it, but what he was doing is his shadow was in the statue.
Whoa.
So now this statue is like stalking him and chasing him and like basically making his life miserable. Like this creepy statue is constantly trying to, get its freedom from him. And so he goes through this whole process and he doesn't know what to do about it. And he's about to like literally kill himself because he's so like lost on how he's scared of this statue that he brought to life. And then Saint Germain comes to him in a dream and says, and says, you created it, you can uncreate it. As the creator, you can also uncreate it. And so that's what
Wow.
he did. And that's how he became the alchemist, essentially. So that's like,
Wow.
yeah. So what does this mean? So, to us, right? I'm not making a statue come to life, but we all create chylocores. We create situations, shadowy situations that we have to, I'll give you an example, for instance. Like, have you ever gotten like angry at someone, especially recently? Like, you've gotten to like a fight or what?
Stuart, never, never.
Right. But just, gotten to this place where you like created this like kylocore.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then
Totally.
all of a sudden,
Absolutely.
like all day long, you're just thinking about this thing, right? It like takes over your whole being because you created a kylocore. You created it. It didn't exist. You made it up. You created this storyline. If you really look at it, you created the story and you made the storyline bigger and bigger until it's like you can't even meditate without it being there all day long. You're like, I'm right, right? So this is what we do. We create these chylocores, and then we get stuck into these realms. And then what we have to realize is that we can uncreate them. And how we can uncreate them is through the heart.
So I love this idea of the Kylakor and this that we create our reality for our eventual evolution and higher good, because it takes the shame out of this like duality of good and bad. It's that, wow, I created this, but there's also an empowerment. You don't have to stay the victim, which is what we were talking about a little bit before. It's suddenly like, whoa, I can actually use this darkness, this shadow, to alchemize to my higher good. So you were just saying that you work with a symbol. I'd love to see that symbol.
Yeah. So I'll just preface a little bit more about this.
Yeah.
So what I realized, I did an ego. I did like a very powerful, like, you fucking, I did this with a friend recently, and it just totally took over my consciousness. And this is kind of like after I had read this book. And I realized, and what happened is that I allowed the storylines to get to me. I allowed the narratives, and then I also created narratives on top of the
Right.
narratives. And I know better, but for some reason, I guess I needed to learn this lesson deeper. And the thing about it is, this is another thing I'm realizing. Because I went to a definitely a lower level of my consciousness, I dipped below what I knew would work for me, and had this experience. It actually stimulated a deep heart awakening for me. So even though I did something that would be considered not above board for me, it actually helped awaken something in me that wasn't even awakened yet. So that's another way of seeing it too. So sometimes to create the Kylokor is a good thing because then you get to learn from it. I'm not telling people to go out there and do bad things, but like to work with everything that happens. So I made a mistake, or I didn't make a mistake. I did what I did, but that stimulated a deeper awakening because I used everything as medicine. So I used everything to transmute and to grow instead of like, oh, I messed up, I'm bad. I didn't get into that kind of headspace. I used it all. So what came through, and this symbol came through to me a long time ago, and I've been, shown to study it. And so this is the symbol. Okay, very simple, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of
So
wisdom.
for somebody who's not watching the visual of this podcast, there is do you want to describe it, Stuart?
Yeah, it's basically a circle with a dot in the center.
Okay, this big gold outer circle with a big gold circle in the middle. Okay.
Yeah, I made it
Kind of looks like a gold target.
Yeah, that's
right.
Well, essentially, there's a lot of things here, right? There's a lot of meanings here. So like the centerpiece could be considered the masculine and the outer could be considered the feminine. So the penetration and then the creating of the storylines, right? Which essentially is a feminine. So the feminine is the creator, right? So when you're growing a baby inside you, you don't say, oh, I'm going to grow an arm today. It just happens, right? The stories just happen, right? So you're just like the vessels for creating the stories, and the center, the initiation, the penetration is the masculine. It's just a spurk of energy to create that. So what I realized with this symbol is that's one way to see it. It's also the quantum particle. But what I started realizing, I went through this very powerful experience after I did this in a medicine ceremony, because I work with the plants with this stuff, is it was showing me the symbol, but showing me how it works. So this is the heart consciousness. This is the source point, and
The center.
and this is the stories. So it's like what we want to do is like we're in the source, we create the stories, we bring the stories back to the heart, the source, stories, heart. So essentially, like as we go through our day to day, we're going to get triggered with stories, and we're going to create more stories on top of those stories. And once we allow ourselves to be distracted and distorted by the stories, we go down these like rabbit holes, when we have to always remember to bring it back to the source point, so that we can continue to create stories from that perspective and learn how to do it more from the source point, the heart, which is also the connection to God, so the grandmaster alchemist within. And what I've been finding now is what I can do is, if I'm meditating and I have these stories running in my head, I can just put them into my heart and they disappear.
Wow.
Love that.
So the more and more you practice coming back to the heart, and like I'm making up stories again, come back to the heart.
Right.
People are on their own path. They're going to have their own storylines. You don't want to get caught up in all of that, because then you're just brought down to that level, and then you're just like in this mishigas of like stories, and creating more stories. And like when I was in the medicine, when I was going through this process, I could see how I created all of it. I created all this. I wanted to like stand up for what I thought was right, and it did nothing. It created nothing. It just took a lot of time. There was no
division.
convincing.
Right. Well, it's interesting because Steph and I have been, as she said when she was introducing herself, one of the aspects of like kind of diving deeper into consciousness and non-duality, one of the things like from that perspective that we've been talking about is thought. Like what you're talking about, the story is all thought.
It's all thought. It's all in your head.
It's all thought. And just that teaching of notice, like I'm in thought. And we believe our thoughts. We believe every one of them to be true. We believe our story until we interrupt it with some kind of practice. Or you were saying you were working with plant medicines. I think each of us, have probably tried different things that have illuminated that our thinking is not true and that story isn't true. And if we're operating from that story, we're kind of in the shadow.
Mm-hmm.
We're in there.
And what happens with the stories is they become agreements. So once you start agreeing, and this is the other thing I learned that was so powerful, is like once you start agreeing to the stories, then you're in limitation. So you had a trauma when you were younger. Oh, I'll never be rich, or I'll never be loved, and then you believe that story, and you become a victim of that story, and then that story seeds your consciousness, your subconsciousness, and then creates the box that you live in, and the limitations you live in.
All right, let's pull on some threads here, because a lot of this work that Steph and I do is similar, right?
Yeah.
So for someone who's listening, who is like absolutely in story, which by the way, I don't mean that to like, I'm never in story. I might be in story 10 minutes from now. So let's talk about this a little bit.
Yeah, it's not about not being in story. We're living in a duality. We're living in a story. We're in co-creation with everything around us. What I'm saying is that you don't want to get lost in your stories. You want to, today it's the place where you're at your safest. The chakra that can't be hacked is the heart, right? So, when they talk about 4D is heart consciousness, right? So when you start to, if you start to like get into this way where you're like, I'm right, you're wrong, you get in this fight and pushing against everything, right? You're out of the heart consciousness, you're in the mind, right? So what you want to do is, like, I think it's important to stand in your polarity, right? Like you're choosing a way, right? So like right now it's important to like either choose to be in service to self or service to all, right? So these choices are important. You're living in a duality. We have to make decisions. It's not we're not in sixth density. We're not just, you know, gods. You know, we're having this 3D experience. So we have to respect that. But we also have to remember we don't want it to control us. We don't want to get lost in it, right? So you choose the things that work for you, but you also allow people to choose the things that work for them, you know? And you love them for who they are because they're you anyway. So it's just about like training yourself to do that. And the only reason why to do this, it's not because it's better or worse than any other way. It's because there's a lot less suffering in it. And if you're
Right.
on a path where you're not like caught up in things and you're wasting time angry and stuff like that for days on end, right? This is a great way to like move through
Will you
things, you
say
know?
like the phrase that is so powerful that you're saying, but that is to me the hardest one to unpack, which is you've said a lot of things that are a lot to unpack, but you just go into your heart. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
okay, and
What does
yeah,
that mean?
yeah,
Right? Right? Yeah, it's a great question. Um,
Because first you have to notice you're in story. Because a lot,
yeah,
like,
you
sometimes
have
when you're
to,
so wrapped in story, it's like it might be a day later that you're like, whoa, what
yeah.
happened yesterday?
And when you're becoming aware of it, then you can start to do like deeper work. So at least you're now conscious of that. So like, all right, I'm caught in a storyline. I'm caught in a
which I notice
storyline,
because
right?
I'm having a lot of thoughts about it. I keep repeating the
And
conversation.
suffering.
Yeah. I keep like
Mhm.
planning what I
Right.
would say, what I should have said, what they should have said, what they did wrong, what I did wrong, blah, 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 to you're kind of insane. And then you're like, okay, wait,
And
stop.
you,
I'm in story. I'm suffering. Okay. Then
right. So you're
step
in story
two
and you're suffering.
is
So that's it. So becoming aware is the key. And then be honest with yourself. My shadow is up here. I'm making this stuff up. I'm a part of this distortion. I'm creating this distortion. And so the more you start to like own it and become clear of it, and then also not judge yourself for it, which is the key to not judge yourself, because the awakening to the awareness is the winning.
Yes.
So the more you start to see that you're creating the stories, that's really the juice. Now you got the answer. Now you just gotta like not judge yourself for it, pat yourself on the back because you've awakened to it. And now what are you gonna do about it? Okay, so now this crazy guy is saying put it in the heart. How does that work? Well, it's a journey, right? It's a journey through
Yeah.
prayer, right? So what you want to do is create a practice. You know, like I sit in my meditation and just focus on my heart. I try to reach to the deepest center of my heart. I feel my heart. I pray with the water with my heart. You know, like I taught you, Steph, and I think did I teach you the water prayer.
You
I like
did.
the. But yeah, so the water, you know, so that's a really good way to start connecting to the heart, and then you can start like the other thing about we have to understand about the heart is it's not a pump, it's a vortex.
I love that.
Yes, that's right. That's actually true. If you unroll it too, if you unroll yes,
This is a sacred geometry of the heart. Okay,
it's
so
beautiful.
right.
Yeah.
So this is
Wow.
another symbol that I study. So these studying these symbols are also
And
quite
just for people
helpful.
that are
You know, like
listening, it's kind of like a gold
Yeah.
knot, is what he just held up.
it's a
A
Gregorian
Gregorian knot.
knot. Yeah, yeah. So
So what if we right now, just as a practice together, what if you just kind of walked Stephanie and I and who's ever listening into dropping into the heart?
right. Okay. So what we do is like take 5 breaths, and then I'm just going to say it. It's very simple.
Hmm.
What I want you to do is connect to the deepest part of your heart and see it as this vortex that spins in on itself, in and out, right? And just be in meditation for, I don't know, let's just do like a 10-second meditation and just feel that. See what I'm doing right now with my hand? Stephanie, you see this? It's like the vortexing in on itself. It's rolling in on itself and rolling out. It's rolling in. So there's a, and there's a toroidal field in that field as well. So you know what a
Yeah,
toroidal
but
field
explain
is?
it.
You
So you can
do.
start, yeah. So a toroidal field is like, it's a vortex essentially. It's like where, down the center, the energy runs and then it comes out and above and around and goes down again. And so what you want to do is let's just breathe and just connect to that vortex and just see that vortex pumping and feel it. Just like try the key is to get the felt sense of it so you can use the visual, but like feel that vortex. Okay, let's do it. Ready? If you have a thought, try to put it in there. If you have a thought of something you want to get rid of, see if you can just drop it in. Even if the thought is, what am I doing? Is this crazy? Does this work? And see if it clears the mind once you put it in, once you know it's in there. That's the other key is know that you did it. Know that it's gone. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you
Thank you
feel
for
it?
that.
Did you have some euphoria in the body with it?
There was like tenderness in the heart. It was a very tender place to go into.
It's intimate too. It's like a very intimate connection with self, unbound, whatever it is. It's just very intimate and gentle, as Steph said.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's interesting because if we can drop into that and communicate from there, and one of the things I loved that you said is not like when you do that, like you had that situation with your friend where you were in that place of not highest self in your communication, but it was like not to have the blame of self. It was just to go in and to like do this practice. Steph and I were talking about that the other day, where it's like not going into shame, like not going into shame for the thing. And this is really
Yeah, I love
interesting.
that about how you teach,
Yeah.
Stuart. A lot of what, because I am working with him, a lot of what he says is don't judge yourself for the things that, maybe you are addicted to or whatever. Like everything is like just no judgment, just see what it does to you, see what the experience feels like. And it is a lovely non-judgmental practice to just like, okay, binge watched whatever it is, or I smoked the cigarette or whatever, but like how did that feel? Not like, oh, I'm so bad for doing it. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, because if you're, a lot of us like to rebel against ourselves. So if you put yourself in a position of like, because there's a lot of self-love issues and self-worth issues, so we rebel against our own good things for ourselves. So if you set yourself up like, oh, I'm bad because I smoke cigarettes, or oh, I'm bad because I did this thing, or I treated this person poorly, then you just like that. First of all, what you're doing is you're lowering your vibration with the judgment immediately. You're just like lowering your so you're putting yourself in a deeper hole than you're
Right.
already in.
Right.
And if you're doing things just to have a different experience without like saying, oh, this is bad, this is good, like, okay, like I've said to Stefanie, like, okay, you've smoked for a very long time. You know what it feels like to smoke. You know all the good things about smoking. We all love tobacco. I love tobacco too. I get it, But would you like to see what it feels like to not smoke tobacco? What would that be like? How would that feel? So you're just, do you feel like it would help your spiritual growth? Well, obviously it will, because when you're addicted to something, you're in lack mentality, and it creates all sorts of, lower vibrational aspects, right? Once you allow yourself to be, especially by a powerful plant like that. So essentially it's like, all right, I want to have a different experience. You just choose to have the different experience just for the sake of having it, not because anything was bad. And we're all like just learning here. Like we don't know what to do. We're learning how to learn. We're learning how to become conscious. We're learning how to be aware. I mean, like, how can we judge
We're going to make
ourselves for
so
that?
many
It's ridiculous.
mistakes.
I mean, it's
Right?
always. And the mistakes are the good stuff. That's where you learn
Right?
stuff. you
Well, it's
know?
interesting. I noticed in my own body when you said, it's not looking at bad or good, and we're just exploring. What would it be like to now explore this? Like, it's similar to when you invite someone to just welcome any emotion. It's suddenly like, oh, the body relaxes. It doesn't have to resist. So when you take away the judgment of like, whoa, you smoked, or whoa, you didn't work out, you didn't do the thing you promised you were going to do. If you take that judgment out and it's like, hey, I'm exploring maybe not working out today, I'm exploring maybe not smoking, I'm going to explore this. It just feels like ease. It takes out a resistance that's there and a judgment that's there and a shadow that actually keeps the whole spiral moving in a direction that it's like the explosion versus the implosion, you
Mhm.
know?
Yes, yes, exactly. And it's like not an invitation to like you could just do bad things because bad things don't matter. They do. There's consequences from doing things that are not above board. If you're eating shitty foods, if you're doing bad things to people, that's going to affect you. It's gonna affect you. But this is the idea is to learn what doesn't work.
Right.
You have to learn what doesn't work. And, sometimes we do things that we don't realize are bad in the moment. And then we do them and we realize how hard it was, how hardcore it was. And then we have a lot of repercussions around that. And, the idea is to like, all right, how do I learn from this? How do I alchemize this? How do I learn how to grow from this? So it's all about learning and studying. That's what I think consciousness is all about. Like we're just studying our consciousness. Like, oh, I did this thing. Why would I do this thing? This is so not something I would do. I don't even really feel this. Like a lot of the things I was mad at him about, I don't even feel that way. I just was like I was like creating all these things. I don't even know how I got
And
to that
so,
point.
I
You know?
want to go back, and maybe we are doing it, but because I kind of moved us onto the judgment thing, just for someone that's like
Mhm.
needing this practice that you're teaching today. So so what you're saying, the things you were mad about, you brought it into your heart, those thoughts, you
Yeah.
bring them.
I mean, I think that practice in itself, it definitely takes. What I would suggest as a practice is to just do a meditation where you tune into the vortex of your heart, whatever that means to you, and just stay with that. So in meditation, you focus on your breath. Mostly people, you don't have to just focus on your breath. You can focus on other things too. You could do what we call active meditations. So just focus on your heart field. Focus on the deepest, most purest part of your heart before the stories took place. Focus deeply into your heart and just put your attention there. Get a felt sense, feel it. That's why I like to teach that water prayer, where you put the glass of water to your heart, where you feel the gratitude going into the water from your heart. Because the more and more we connect to that heart field on a daily basis, the more and more we'll have all the magic of it. And there's a lot of magic there. You know, it's a very powerful portal. It literally can deal with anything. It can deal with your fears. It can deal with anything. All you got to do is just really in tune with it and know that that is the portal to God. Essentially, it's the portal to source point. Where you come from. And if we allow ourselves to get, so as the geometry builds, like so, you would say, like once you have the source point and then you have the circle, right? Then around the circle would be a square, and then around the square would be a triangle, and then another circle, and then another square, and then it keeps on going out and out. So the storylines keep on building as the sacred geometry builds.
Mhm.
So what we want to remember is to always come back to that source point.
So, one of the things that you said that I'm interested in, because you talked about kind of the agreements that we're in. And I find that kind of fascinating because I think some of the agreements can be psychic, maybe energetic, but can you speak on that a little bit? Because a lot of times what happened for you, that was in relationship. And a lot of this is showing up in relationship because when we're by ourselves, it's like we're pretty okay. So our triggers and these shadow aspects of ourselves tend to show up when we're in dynamic with somebody else because that's where the stories arise. I was hurt. They weren't listening to me, whatever it is. I felt invisible, all the stories, right? Um, so can you talk about that? Because it goes back again to that we're creating the story. We can stay in the victim, We can take back our power, or we can be in power, not take back our power. But what are the silent agreements that seem to be happening between people?
I mean, it's not even just people. It's actually really what I'm talking about is it first within yourself. So, so in other words, like I have this incredible body worker I go to. He's a really funny guy. He's like, we were all born into black magic.
Right.
Right? Like culture is like essentially black magic. I always like that line because it makes a lot of sense actually, you know. And I think when we talk about black magic, we're talking about everything that's not from the heart. You know, like, you know, rules, regulations, traumas, all these things that happen. We come out of the womb and there's someone slapping us and there's all these big faces. And it's like traumatizing from the very beginning. And then you're put into school and you're saying, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that, you're bad, you're this, you're that, you're this. Someone teases you because you have the wrong genes on. And then all of a sudden, all this stuff builds in the psyche and you develop like self-worth issues, you know, and you get further and further away from source as you get older and older, because as more and more stories arise and more distortions are created within your psyche, right? And then what happens is we start developing personality and then believing in storylines. I can never be a multimillionaire. I can never get someone who's going to love me. I'll never be loved. You know, like, you know, you hear people sometimes, they just talk about themselves like this, you know, like it's incredible. Like I have some clients like this. They'll just like, you know, just talk so poorly. I'm like, do you hear what you're saying? You know, you're making these agreements. These don't even exist. It's not even
You're
real.
casting spells.
You're casting your spell. Well, it's already casted on them. They're just like
I
agreeing to
see. I
them
see.
over and over again. So it's like they've already agreed to them. So that's the
Uh-huh.
casting of it. They're in the agreement that they're not worthy. And so all of a sudden, what happens? Your consciousness gets completely limited to that agreement, right? And then you're stuck in it. And then you think that this is the way things work. But you're the creator of your reality. It's very clear, you know, so you have to find what those limitations are. You have to rework the language, you know, of how you speak about yourself. And then you have to find a way through prayer of uncreating the agreements that you've made and then creating new ones that are more high vibration, you know, that lifts your spirit instead of limits you, you know. And this is something that it's been very big for me recently, like coming to that recognition and seeing how I've made my own agreements. And as I'm really, and the thing is, it's not so hard to, once you become aware of them, that's like the main thing. Like the awareness is almost the healing. It pretty much is. I believe that the awareness is the healing.
It's like the
Yeah.
illumination, really.
Yeah. You're
It's like
illuminating. You're seeing it.
you're illuminating, and then you suddenly, for the first time, have a choice to do it differently. And prior to that illumination, you were stuck in the story that you keep creating. And granted, it's no one's fault that that story exists. So much of it is conditioning, societal, like experiences in life that just are. They just
Yep.
are.
They
So
just
it's
are.
our continued agreement about them, about ourselves, that become these limiting stories that we keep ourselves in these boxes. But it's so interesting. I think the other thing I'm just noticing it within myself in this conversation is my heart right now, like the sensation in my body. You know, it's like when you attune to it, it's like right there. But so much of our lives, we're not. We're up here in the head where the story exists. But it's that invitation that you just did to drop in that I'm just like, I'm noticing my body. I'm noticing the energy field that now is right here. You know, it's that simple act. It's so interesting.
It's been a long process for me, to be honest. Like I just had a real awakening with it recently. I think I've been going through, I look back now because I do these ceremonies, me and Elizabeth, my partner, we do these ceremonies once a month to do our own work. And I've been doing them for a couple of years with her. And I realized that all of them were based in this now. And in different, it was being shown to me for years. And I'm just now like really like awakening to it. Like I feel like I'm finally like, all right, I got to focus on just this because I keep on getting myself in trouble with the other things that I'm wasting time using, you know, getting caught up in things. You know, I mean, I could be much more productive. I could be in more of a creation field because if you're getting caught up in your mind in these storylines, you're not in a creation field. You're not creating anything. You're just thinking about that you're right. you know? And another thing I wanted to bring up, what you were talking about, which was, so once you find the agreements, the limited agreements. Now, here's the thing. This is the funny thing a lot of people do. Once they realize and they become conscious of it, right? They become awake. They may still not want to change because they're comfortable with their victim. They're comfortable with their limitations. They don't necessarily want the responsibility of joy and happiness or free-flowing joy,
Freedom.
because that's a responsibility, or that's something that's, they're no longer a victim of something. It's like, it's a whole nother, it's like going through the doors of reality and not knowing what's on the other side. You know what it feels like to be a victim. You know what it feels like to suffer. People get comfortable with that. It's like something for them to do all the time, like complain about their suffering, So what I tell a lot of my clients is, get clear with yourself. Now that you know and you're awake and you're aware, get clear. Get committed, command it. I'm done with this teaching. I'm done with this limited thought process. I'm done with this agreement. Get committed to clearing it from your system, from your mind, body, spirit complex on all three levels. And once you clear it, it opens up. And then all of a sudden it allows all that like limited thinking. Once you open up that spectrum, you're opening up space. And then from the higher vibration, because you're getting rid of that density, you lift, and then more higher vibrational stuff can come in and fill that space, but you can't fill that space if you're like in this, like for instance, like a perfect example of this would be like someone breaks up with, you, right? You get broken up with by somebody and you're hurt by that. And then you're just thinking about that person and you're thinking about getting back and you're all clotted up with this person and there's no space for anything else to come in. So you're wasting your time on this whole thing that didn't work and wasn't working. The person probably did you a favor, but you're all hurt and upset and feeling bad, and he's bad and I'm not, and so, she's bad, he's bad, whatever it is, the stories. And what does that do? That completely closes the space off from anything else coming in. You can see how that works. So once you like let go of all that and you have open space, then new things can flow in. So we have to see that. We have to be aware of that. We have to be aware that that is how things work and know it as a truth. And that's the other thing is about this stuff is about like knowing it, like choosing this perception, seeing that as a reality, seeing that you can be the creator of your reality, choosing it, and then going through an initiatic process of learning how that works. Which
now I have a question on what you just said. Like, so going just to the breakup thing,
yeah,
and someone's in grief, right?
right.
Can grief be an initiatory process, or is that a story? Is
Well,
feeling that emotion and like kind of allowing it? Like, where do you fall with that?
grief could be used as a great mover of energy to allow the space to open. That grief is powerful. It's a great emotion. But you
so
don't
there's a
want to
difference
like,
between grief and getting stuck in the story.
you don't want to get stuck in the story. It goes back to getting stuck. It's like grieve, move the energy. I mean, I always say like when when I used to serve ayahuasca and people used to cry, have a cry purge. I was like, oh my God, I'm so jealous. Like the best purge ever is the cry purge. You know what I mean? It's just like, oh, like letting that
I
all
love a
out.
man that says that, right?
Yeah,
A man that says, I wish I was doing the cry purge.
yeah, so good. But I for me, I know I haven't had many of them. That's why I'm kind of like, when I have had them though, it's just so powerful. So to have that grieving, powerful release, and like to use it sacredly as a release, allow all that to go, cut those ties, cut those those hooks with the grief. It's a powerful emotion. So, I mean, easier said than done, but, it's something to think about while you're going through the process. Yeah.
Well, you're talking about purge, actually, which brings me to a topic. You were talking about the release of tears and the release. And you and I were talking before that I've actually never talked on this podcast about the sacred medicine combo. And as I was thinking about it, I was like, and I've never done combo. So, but it made me think of the purge because if you do, ayahuasca, which I have done, or iboga, it brings on a purge. And I've certainly been, through the process of purging deep emotion. And I'm like, what is the quality of this purge? So actually, we're segueing perfectly into some work that you do,
Let's
which is
talk
with
about
a
combo.
sacred medicine combo. So Steph, have you ever done
I have.
combo?
I've done it once, and I
Okay.
definitely purged.
How was your experience?
I
What?
definitely purged. But speaking of, this was many years ago before I met you, and I was same thing, trying to work on my tobacco addiction, and I can't say that it was succeeded. So I don't know, but I did it one time, and I had a lot of dense stuff going on at that time. So I don't know that I had a huge response to it, but I'd love to hear what your experience of serving it is.
I mean, for you, I know because we work together. You're just not committed yet.
You
You haven't
think?
like laid it down that you want to quit.
Stuart sent me a bag of prayerful tobacco, sacred tobacco that he grew. And he said, just pray with it every morning. This was a month ago. It's sitting in the Ziploc bag
Yeah.
still on my altar. Like I kind of like pushed it to the side so that I didn't
Oh,
have to
yeah.
look at it
Oh, yeah.
and see that I'm like not
Yeah.
doing the prayer.
Hide it behind the
Yeah. I'm like, it's on
plant.
my altar. It's just,
I'm waiting for the phone call when she's like, I'm committed. I want to do it.
I am waiting for that
Is that
too.
what Lila was playing with the other day, thinking it was like her kitty, her kitty toy?
Lila's been praying very hard. My cat.
Where's
The
the
cat
sacred
house.
tobacco? I don't know. I was there. I did not see it on the altar. What?
Yeah. No, I
I
sent it to
can
her
say
because
though that
I
I do, to give Steph credit. I can say that we did do a little pinch tobacco and thank the land and
yeah.
open and close ceremony with the tobacco.
That I
So
went and was
yeah,
smoking from that same packet later that night. But yes, we did.
She'll get to it. I know it's definitely weighing on her. I can feel it.
Well, it's all what you said. It's like it's all just about. It's not no judgment of it. It's like what experience do I want to have, and I want to have the
Right.
other experience. But I mean, and we don't have to get into my tobacco thing unless everyone wants to.
well, I love
But
it, and I want to tell you that I love you as a smoker, and I'm going to love you as a
thank you,
non-smoker.
thank you,
Yeah,
thank
me
you,
too.
thank you,
You don't have to do anything with it.
thank you. But yeah, it's a powerful one. I know you guys really touched on that in the last episode, which is what brought me to hire you. And then I'm still just going slow with that. But yeah, I know that you with the combo, the purging, and with tobacco, the purging. And I know Michaela was curious about just that release in general.
Yeah. So the purging's interesting, right? I'll just talk about purge for a second. You know, it's a movement of energy, but it's definitely not only about a physical thing. It's once again working on the mind, body, spirit complex. The way the plants work is on the three bodies at the same time. So like Western medicine is like go to a foot doctor for a foot problem, hand doctor, tooth doctor, so they compartmentalized. The plants work in the whole, right? So when you're purging from the depths of that, from the mind, body, spirit complex, right? Purging is interesting, right? Some people can get into I actually got into like a BDSM relationship with purging with
I
plants
love it. I
at
love
one
it.
point of my relationship where I
I
felt
mean,
like
wait, we just have to pause for a second from the guy who like loves to cry and loves a good cry purge. Could you say that again?
yeah. So this, I don't know why this just came through. So when I first started working with the plants, it's like back in those days, we were doing like a lot of medicine. Like it's not needed these days as much. Like we were doing a lot of medicine, like I remember I was just always wanted to be purging more, getting this stuff out of me, I purge and I feel better and I purge and I feel better. And then one time I went and I did combo and I did 13 dots, 10 on my arm and 3 on my heart.
Do you want to just explain what that is for people?
So combo is a monkey frog that lives in the Amazon. Okay. It's if you would you like to hear the indigenous story, how it was discovered?
Sure.
So how it was discovered, discovered into Brazil. And basically what happened was this entire tribe got sick. Everyone in the tribe got sick. The medicine man went out into the jungle and drank ayahuasca. And then this frog came to him named Combo, as the story goes.
Wow.
And the frog told him how to take the medicine off them, which is like the sap off their bellies, and put it on these sticks, and this whole process. And then basically all the frogs came to the tribe and they healed the whole tribe. So that's how Kambo was discovered. This is about 250 years ago, from what I understand. So what I love about Kambo the most is this one idea. It's a monkey frog. It's poisonous. It has no predators. It lives in the Amazon jungle. So what is it doing? It's just eating and having sex, right? It has no predators, so it has super confidence. It has a lot of machismo. It's living in this abundant place. It's basically living in heaven, and nothing's trying to kill it. So it has this machismo to it, this like strength and
I am
confidence.
the frog of the jungle.
It's the frog of the jungle, and you can feel it, like that spirit you get. So some of the great things about Kambo, right? So how the indigenous speak about it is there's this like Panama, which would be called the dark cloud that settles over our heads, as we would call it, the dark cloud, and this medicine just lifts it. So that dark cloud can create disease, anxiety, all these things, and this medicine just clears the dark cloud, right? It also has like over 100 peptides. I don't know if you know anything about peptides. I don't know that much, but they're supposedly really good for you. But this has like a lot of peptides, and they do a lot of different things. You can cure Lyme's with this medicine. You can cure many diseases with this medicine, if worked with it properly and also prayerfully. So essentially, maybe I can show you because I just did some actually. So there it is.
Okay. For anybody watching, on Stuart's left upper arm are 3 circles that are dark. Well, you have actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, you have more
7.
than that.
I did 2 sessions.
And
so
they are...
Yeah, they're gateways. So essentially what we do is we take a hot poker, like a hot stick, and I flick off the top layer of skin. So just make it like a little portal.
Burn.
Right?
You burn yourself.
But it's not a burn. It doesn't burn you. It's just the way I do it is you're just taking off the top layer of skin. So it's just a flick. It's not like
Does it hurt?
Yeah.
It's not as bad as the Kambo.
Okay.
The whole experience.
I love how people go, "Oh, is it over?" I'm like, "No, just starting."
It's
so unpleasant.
If you think this is bad, wait a couple seconds.
So then what I do is I'll take the sap and I'll make like little dots, and I'll put that medicine on the gateways. And then you'll go through a very difficult physical about 15, 20 minutes of physical uncomfortableness. The worst part is about 5 minutes, really. You'll probably purge, and then you feel great. And then while you're doing it, you're saying, "I'll never do this again." And then after you get out of it, you're like, "When can I do it again?" Essentially how it works.
Because of like the feeling of cleanse and connection and clarity.
You feel clean inside. The other thing is it's nature's vaccination. So it builds up your immune system. So recently I just had a tooth infection, and I don't really use Western medicine much, but I do believe in antibiotics. So an infection in my head means take antibiotics. So I took 1 round, then I took 2 rounds, and still didn't clear. And I took a 3rd round and it didn't clear. And now I'm like, I have a systemic infection in my mouth. That's not good, And so I did Kambo and it's gone. And I'm like, why didn't I not do this in the beginning? Because actually usually I would, but I always think that, when it comes to infections, antibiotics is a great way
kind
to
of
do
the same.
it.
Yeah.
But
you also had a mutual friend of all of ours who had Lyme. And so he came to you last weekend to clear Lyme.
Yeah, it was Kambo all weekend. We did like 3 sessions each.
Wow.
And he seems pretty clear right now. He seems pretty, he told me he feels
amazing. Because he was having like brain fog and feeling really different. So that's amazing.
So a lot of people work with this medicine very clinically, which means they work to get the purge. They're like, put a lot of dots on, get them to purge. I don't work like that with it. I work with it much more metaphysically. So with the prayer, you don't even need to purge on it. Like I actually didn't purge at all. I had a very deep experience, but I didn't purge. You know, Brian did, but you don't need to purge. You know, the purge is if it comes, it comes. You just trust the process because once you pray and you're praying the prayer with the plants or the frogs, you know, you trust in that prayer. So whatever happens is the prayer and you trust that it's going to work. So if you purge, great. If you don't,
Yeah.
you
It's
know,
interesting
choose course
because
beneath that.
on your first episode, we talked about tobacco
Mhm,
and how tobacco is this beautiful sacred medicine, but it also can be a poison.
mhm.
And now we're talking about combo, which kind of is the
It's a
same.
neurotoxin.
It's a poison, but it
Yeah.
also can be an amazing medicine. And do you think it comes down to use and prayer on whether that is a medicine
and
or a
and
poison? And
dosage.
use
If you
and
want,
dosage?
if you want a high level of results, trusting your prayers and having that connection and being in co-creation with these medicines and praying with them and praying in gratitude to them every day. Like every day I say thank you to the combo, whether I'm serving it or not. I just do it. I have all the plants I work with, all the, you know, the elements I work with, I thank every day. So I'm in communion with them. I'm in co-creation with them. I'm constantly in prayer, in gratitude with these specific plants that I'm working with right now. And I keep that chi going because what I've discovered is through the gratitude and the respect for the sacred, right? Is how the technology opens up or the conversation opens up. So it's through the heart, essentially, the conversation, you know, with the plants and
Well, it's interesting because I remember interviewing you on the first episode, thinking like, wow, I don't know if I've met many people that have been so intentionally devoted to prayer. And like you went through the whole thing about fire and, you know, your kind of devotion to elements. I'm kind of fascinated by this. Could you maybe, now you're talking about combo, it's a medicine you work with, but for someone who's just living their everyday life and they're not necessarily in relationship to, you know, a plant or something or an element. One of my last episodes that I just did, you know, at the end of it, there was kind of this call for all bodied people to return to nature, to return to earth. That, you know, we're not necessarily here to save each other. That if each of us can do kind of our own return to what you're doing, actually, these practices, so much can shift. What are some things you suggest, you know, in this area?
Yeah, I mean, it's that's essentially what I'm doing now is teaching how to do this. So what I do is I'm the journeyman, right? So I go deep with things. Like my whole thing is I've always been wanting to really like learn about my own spiritual sovereignty, how to hold myself in my spiritual practice, you know, and working with these very powerful plants and working with spirits and being open to these like interdimensional worlds. You know, you have to have some sort of navigational system, especially if you don't have a guru or someone like holding you in the process. But I never really, I've had teachers, but I never, I think I talked about this in the last podcast. You know, it felt like there was limitations there that weren't in alignment with some of the things that I was feeling.
You
So I
said the
needed to
plants
learn
knew more.
the plant, the spirits, you know, my connection through God is more, you know, my higher self knows more, you know, like, so what I learned is the best way to do this is through prayer, right? So you can create a container. So let's say I want to learn about how to connect to fire, like what I did. So what do? I just hold the fire all the time and pray with it and with deep gratitude and open up that spectrum and just be there with it. And the water, for instance, you know, the water prayer that I teach everybody, you know, I just did that for years. I just kept on deepening into it. And then like, you know, like, it's like meditation, right? You'll meditate and it's like nothing good, nothing good. And all of a sudden you have like a big opening. It's the same way with this. You know, there's a pilgrimage, there's a devotional act. And in that devotional act opens up wisdom, you know, and then before you know it, you just know things. Like you just understand. And a lot of it isn't really language you can talk about. You know what I mean? Like for instance, with the combo, one, I put it on me. I actually was speaking to it and told it to go right to my jaw. And I felt it go all through my body, right to my jaw, and like work on that, powerfully, like it would knock me off my seat. It was so powerful. So once you like know it's like this knowing, like you're in communion, you're in co-creation, you're in respect of the sacred, you're on your path of growth, you're committing to that. You're committing to your evolution essentially, and just allowing, essentially like you pray that, right? It's like a command, like I want to evolve. I want to connect to fire. I want to connect to the water. And you get that commitment going, right? And then you command it. And that's the masculine aspect. And then there's the feminine aspect where you receive it. You receive the prayer. And that's, is something that happens, so you're like praying and then receiving, praying and then receiving. So a lot of people forget about the receiving part. So the masculine part is the prayer and the receiving part is the feminine. So you have to have both of those to really gestate a powerful prayer, And then what happens is through study of how the prayer works, right? And keep on seeing how it works, then you start to know your prayers work. And the more you know they work, the more they work. So then the more confidence you have in what you're doing. So like, for instance, like, when I serve medicine, right? Like I pray, I know the prayer's going to work. So whatever happens, whatever craziness happens in the ceremony, I know the prayer is working. It's a part of it. I don't judge anything. I don't think about it. I'm not worried about what they're thinking or feeling. I just know that the prayer is working. I'm just in the prayer. And at the end, it always comes through because I'm in the trust of that. And my trust of that, then they trust it. There's a confidence to it. Everything, like all the water's running. For instance, like, this new thing I'm doing, is like teaching people how, before they do plant medicine, to like 2 weeks before they do it, get into a devotional prayer, know exactly what it is you're praying for and what you're trying to receive. Don't just walk in like 2 days before, like, oh, what's my prayer, like, yeah, you get the water moving. So once you get into that ceremony, boom, it just opens up. And you'll get so much information. And then once you have the information, then you can integrate it through practices of like awareness and consciousness and observation and just shifting the loops from that perspective. Yeah. It's more fine-tunement. And that gets to the question what we were talking about before is like, what are we doing with this whole psychedelic craziness, right?
Yeah. So Stefanie and I just got back from MAPS, and we were at the closing ceremony. And at the closing ceremony, there was a little bit of a protest. And there were Indigenous voices that wanted to be heard. And Rick Doblin, the crowd kind of was like, some were saying, let them speak. And others were saying, let him speak. So there's this kind of dynamic going on. And Rick Doblin, had them come up on stage, and they told, some of them expressed some things. So before that, I just want to mention, it was a big conference. So it was estimated that 13,000 people went. It was interesting because I would say that one of the things that one of the people said, the first woman that got up, was like very angry. And that just kind of lost me. It's kind of like what you were saying, what we were talking about before. Like once you take away that guilt, my body goes, And so like when she met the crowd with anger for whatever reason, I felt for me, I didn't have an effect. And then the next few people that got up were very much speaking from the heart. And the thing that stuck with me, because it's in the conversations that I'm having, as a matter of fact, one of the people that I had interviewed, all of a sudden as that group walked out, I was like, oh, there she is. Like, so I've been trying to bring different voices to the psychedelic space. And in that, I'm having some response to the Western model, as I've been saying, like, in my opinion, is superimposing itself on the earth medicine space in ways that I'm concerned about. Similar to the last time you talked about tobacco, right? And so you talked about how tobacco is this sacred plant, and then this capitalist greed model got put over it, and then suddenly it becomes a poison and an addictive thing in our society, right? So one of the men actually got up and said, similar to what you said on that podcast, which was, you need to understand that if you go this way with earth medicines, then they're looking out probably at a conference center under fluorescent lights, of thousands of people coming, and a lot of the talk is about research, synthesizing, and I want to say that I'm nuanced. I have a foot in both, so it's not black and white for me. But he said, basically, don't go this way. These plants have an intelligence. It's kind of like he mentioned kuba, which is the root plant for cocaine. That was, again, this sacred plant that then once it got in the hands of this greed mind, I'll call it, or the systems that we have, it does a lot of damage. And he was kind of warning against the Western minds not being intentional about these way these plants are. And I'm not saying that the scientific way is unintentional and it doesn't have intent. I'm not saying that.
He was
I'm saying
basically
that what he said hit a chord with me. Yeah.
Yeah,
Go
and he
ahead,
was
Steph.
basically saying that these plants don't want to be commodified. Whether it's cocaine, which is in an illegal, drug trafficking, huge money market, or if it's, poppy, which becomes the opioids that are legally being sold to people, they have their own intelligence and they will start to harm us instead of help us because they don't want to be part of these systems, whether it be the capitalist, legal system or the black market system. They are players and they are beings and intelligences in this in this world. That they have their own desires and wishes, and they're not going to just like be sold in little gram vials and be happy about that and be
I
synthesized.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've had, I have had different experiences with like selling plants and not selling plants. And right now I'm not selling plants. I will give plants to people that are doing my programs, depending on what we're working on and I feel that they may need. And if I have some plants that would help them, then I would,
And you also had an experience where
give them to them.
ayahuasca told you to stop serving, like you,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I mean, that was more, that was not more like you're bad, you shouldn't serve this medicine. It was more like it was time for me to move on to other things. You know what I mean? I like my relation. I still every day thank ayahuasca. She's still so deeply with me. I've drinking so much of that medicine. It just got to a point where what it is. I just didn't want to drink it anymore. That was really a big part of it. That was a big part of it as well. Is like I needed like I didn't need to drink so much medicine all the time. It was like taking up a lot of space in my life, And then once I started doing these programs and teaching people how to work with plants, I felt like this was better use of my time. And I think ayahuasca saw that too. You know what I mean? I think ayahuasca liked what I was doing, which was teaching people how to work with plants, teaching people how to work with the prayer, how to work with the sacred, And that's what we need to do right now is really embody that, do that as facilitators and teachers of ourselves and people that have been on the path for a long time. We just got to get as dialed as we can and just continue to like teach people about the sacred and help them connect to it because the plants aren't going to allow that. He's right. I've seen that too. The plants are just not going to allow it. It's going to backfire. And that's why one of the things I'm doing is learning every day how to be even more fine-tuned and more deeper in gratitude to the sacred than I ever have been, because I'm recognizing that everyone's going through this. It's going this very sloppy way, and it's going to be like they're going to be growing these things. They don't understand. You grow mushrooms. You got to grow mushrooms in a like hermetically sealed environment. They pick up all sorts of energies. You know what I mean? All these medicines do. They're and if they're angry, if the spirit is angry, it's not going to go well for the facilitators. You know what I mean? It's not going to go well for the people. And we're getting to that a little bit now. I see that happening, but I also know it's kind of a part of the journey that we're on, So what do we do? It's like we're more concerned about what am I going to do about it, I mean, I can't stop people. I'm not going to go out there and preach like, oh, you're doing it all wrong. What do I know?
Mm-hmm.
Once again, I'm creating more stories, right? We talked about this,
right?
So bring it to
and
the
that's
heart.
why I was saying too. It's not the black and white.
Yeah.
It's nuanced. We're all learning.
Yeah. We're all learning. And as white people, we,
was
we
just
get
about
a
to
lot
say
of
that.
shit for working with plants, I mean, I've had a lot of, you know, backfire on me with that, but that's other people's shit. It's not mine. I mean, my heart is in the right place. What I'm doing is in integrity, and I'm always learning how to be more in integrity, and it
I
always
think
gets
this is an
better,
important
you know?
conversation. I think this is
Yeah.
this is actually an important
Yeah.
conversation. Stephanie and I were having this the other day, and one of the things I've noticed is like again, it's like the awareness of how much space you take up, the awareness as a white person in the space, adding all voices deserve equal at the table. And I was saying to Stephanie, as I've cleared some of my own stuff, I think like, I mean, maybe, you know, I don't know how to say this, but it's like as I've kind of cleared some of my own maybe shame or something. As you said, people have kind of come at you. I haven't had that, but I felt it inside. Like I am white, and people would say like, "Oh, you're white. You shouldn't be doing this work." And it's like, isn't that doing the very thing? Isn't that creating the same kind of system? And it's dicey. This is a dicey, delicate conversation because I think for myself, similar to what you said, is I'm always willing to learn more. I'm always willing to say, maybe my awareness isn't where it needs to be, but I'm listening to my guidance. I'm listening to what feels true for me, and I'm going to the plants and asking as well. But yeah, I think it's a delicate conversation in the psychedelic space.
Yeah, everything's a little bit delicate for people these days. I mean, I've had my feelings around this stuff, and I've heard the rumblings around me, and I took offense to it, and I got caught in the storylines, and then recently, I realized that like I just keep my head down and doing what I'm doing. I mean, I'm in service to the all. I'm in service, like I'm helping people. I see that I'm helping people. People are reacting to my help, in a positive way. Everybody's winning here. The indigenous people, it's interesting, and this is a crazy thing. So, I've had a lot of interaction with indigenous, and I've worked with a lot of indigenous people, and, they got a lot of trauma and they got a lot of feelings, and they got a lot of stories, and rightfully so. And, I come, even though I'm not religious and everything, I come from a Jewish background, and we got stories too, and we got feelings too, and we got heavy ancestor stuff too, but we don't have to choose to carry that. We don't have to choose to be there. And, I've went through my own process with carrying all that heaviness, with my own ancestry, and realizing that my ancestors don't want me to carry it. Like they want me to evolve. They want me to learn and grow. It's not, they did all that, they went through that so that I can learn from it and grow from it, and I just
There are
believe
very few people on the planet that haven't had some kind of like, to my Irish, I think we came here as like potato famine refugees. You know what I mean? It's like, it's an interesting conversation. And if we can do basically what you were talking about is meet in the heart, drop the stories, meet in the heart, in the present day, in the present moment with each other, and go from there the best that we can and learn from each other and be open to that learning. What more can we really do?
I mean, on some level, if you think of it like this, white people and Jewish people, I guess, also, we've been so disconnected from our roots and from our magic and from our connection with the earth through genocides and moved away from our homelands. And like, I mean, like if I look back in my lineage, like in my, like I know my grandfather, where my grandfather was from, but before that, I have no idea. Cause like, I have no connection to my land. I think I'm from Romania. I don't know for sure, I mean, the indigenous people still have connection to it, and they've been showing us, and I'm very grateful to them for that because I've learned a lot from them, you know, but I also, I'm also now connecting to my ways through my prayers, through my lineage, and healing my own stuff, and I think we all have the right to do that, and we all have the right to be in service to the all and help other people and work
Right.
with these plants and work with these spirits and work with these elements. And I don't really feel that whatever this, we're even the indigenous people are learning. And the thing with the indigenous people, there's some indigenous people that aren't in alignment either.
No. And
I mean, I keep on getting texts on my like Instagram account of like, people selling ayahuasca from Peru, like, through the internet, or selling these medicines. So there's a lot of shenanigans going on down there too. I mean, yeah, we have this colonization and, the white people bad thing, and we're all going through the white people bad thing. But, I mean, I didn't colonize anybody. you know, I'm just trying to evolve like everybody else.
I mean, it's kind of like we all have been captured by
Yeah.
that.
We've all
White
been-
bodies have been captured by it as well. And I think one thing that, I'm noticing myself, and you're probably noticing, it's that process of decolonizing myself through
Yeah.
coming back to Earth, whether that's through Earth medicines or not. It's also decolonizing my mind from the story of being like all of it, like those stories of what we were taught to believe about each other. One of the biggest stories that I would say that my biggest prayer right now for like my biggest story is the story of separation. Like that's
Yeah.
a story. And, that veil to drop where I know it's like right here, but that's the greatest story of all, that we're separate from anything.
The greatest story never
anyone.
told.
The greatest story that isn't true.
The
that's
greatest story never told.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's good that you're connecting to this idea of separation and oneness, and like just like that's like that symbol I showed, the circle and the dot. It's like, to really understand that yes, we're experiencing separation, but we are all oneness. And
Right.
and once again, it's through the source point, through the heart, that we can really connect to that in a deeper way. It's funny. It sounds cliche, but it's the way.
Yeah.
Like, just connect to your heart. It's so funny. If I would have just seen myself like 20 years ago and seen me talking about this right now, I would be laughing on the floor. I would be literally laughing on the floor at myself. I'm teaching prayer. I would have been laughing at myself. There's no way I would have believed it. But, these simple ideas, and you think about it, like it's been, we've been pushed away from these ideas that, God isn't there for us, and like we're not God, and that we're, woo-woo hippie stuff, being in the heart, being a tree hugger is bad, So like all these things that are super healing and super powerful have been like commodified and like turned against us. And they're very simple things,
Stuart, I guess what I would want to know, like if I, it has these many, many sides to it. But like if I'm a therapist, say, and I'm working with these clients and it's just so slow, the work, and the needle's not moving, and you want to really help them, and soon mushrooms are legal, or MDMA is legal, and you don't have a relationship with these medicines, and you're hearing this podcast and hearing this conversation around how to keep them sacred. Like what, their intentions are good. They want to use them for healing for their clients, and they will help with that. But how would you recommend to someone maybe just learning how to work with these medicines in a responsible way for them to keep them sacred and to offer prayers and introduce that idea to someone that's really in a clinical model, or to anyone? I mean, to anyone at all, how to really keep these medicines sacred.
I believe it really just starts with gratitude, just being deeply grateful for them, these medicines, and start with that. And that will open up spectrums of understandings into being more respectful to the sacred, within the sacred as yourself, and you are that, and it is that, just being in respect of the sacred that you are a part of, and also just being in gratitude, like that's what, and listening, like knowing when it's okay to do something when it's not, you know what I mean? Like learning, like this is a learning curve here. I went through it. We all did, I'm sure you guys have been through levels of learning curve and what you're doing. I mean, you're gonna watch things like, oh wow, that happened. Oh my God, that happened, and now I know that how that works. When I work with these fans, it's just there's a lot of deep. I think trust is really important. Trust within yourself and trust in what you're doing. And between trusting yourself and trusting what you're doing, working with a prayer and with a deep intention, being super grateful for the medicines, having respect for the sacredness of it all, honoring it in that way, you're gonna have a more fine-tuned experience with working with these plants for sure. Just that alone, you know. Um, I mean, think about it. Like, how many times in your past you've taken a handful of mushrooms and just gone to a Dead concert or something? You had a kind of a transformative experience. So they can work in that way too. But if you really want to work with them as a medicine and really fine tune the experience, it's just about deepening in a study with them and working with them in a way that you get to know them better, and you're in a prayer with them, and you're nurturing them, and you're growing them, or you're connecting to them in many different ways you can. You know, building an altar, just showing reverence, essentially, I feel is the best way. And it does something to your own psyche. It creates a confidence, and that confidence in your connection. I feel like it creates it helps move the energy that you're trying to move within yourself, through that, just that ritual, the ritual of the gratitude and the respect and the creating a nice ceremony for yourself, with an altar. And, you can learn how to do these things, like you can learn how to do a ceremony, just go to a lot of ceremonies and watch. I'm not saying that you should go around running around, everyone should run around doing ceremonies. I mean, it's a lot to hold energy for people. You have to learn how to do that. It's a very powerful thing to hold energy for someone else. And when you're serving these plants, you're connected to that healing, and you have to move that energy through your own body, and so there's a lot of things to learn about that. But if you're called to it and it feels right, just go on that journey to learn. There's many ways to learn that. And I do believe that enough people doing it from the perspective of sacredness and gratitude and working in a clean way with a lot of respect, is the most important thing that we could be doing right now. I mean, I've been hearing the craziest stories of people doing things. Like, I just heard this story about like these people that have been doing ayahuasca for years. You would think that they knew what they were, that they had an understanding of the sacred. And then I heard this story that they were serving mushrooms and they didn't know what they were doing. And it was like this huge group of people, and it was this big disaster, and they were just like a mess with the whole thing. And you were thinking like, you're doing medicine for this long. Have you learned anything? And the answer is, I think most people haven't. And this is where the issue is. They're just still expecting the shaman to do it for them. And they think that then they play shaman, and then, they're not in that alignment. Essentially they'll probably learn from that, which is a good thing. I mean, but this goes back to that story we were talking about before. Like, is psychedelics going the way they are bad? I mean, it's doing what it's doing.
Right.
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 I
It's the
just think like,
duality right here.
yeah, it's just happening. It's happening. It's part of the consciousness now. It's definitely doing something. It's definitely helping a lot of people. It's getting messy. I mean, I think the 60s were like when they first discovered psychedelics. It was messy. It was hippie. They were just like, oh, free love, blah. And then they kind of fell apart. That whole movement. I feel like now we have an opportunity to work with these plants in a way more fine-tuned way, ceremonially, with a lot of clarity, and I think more and more people need to be learning about that and want to learn about that, and not just, try to like spiritually bypass the whole process and jump into the shaman seat.
Right.
And, there is something to that too. I started serving medicine. Probably people would say that I wasn't ready to be doing that. And on some level, they might have been right. Looking
I
back
think
on
we're all
that.
learning. As you say, we're all learning as we go. All of us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you have to, I guess you have to be learning to want to like really learn and grow from everything you're doing, and
Exactly.
recognizing that it's a responsibility. It's a big one, and you have to respect
Huge.
it. You can't play around. You can't use it as a power grab, you know, you have to really get to the place where you at least are aware of your humbleness and be in that space and be in your heart consciousness when you're working with these medicines, because especially with other people,
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Wow. Well, this has been an amazing
Oh
conversation.
my God, it keeps on going. I feel like I
I
blabbed.
love
Like
it.
you guys brought so much out of me today. I was like, what? Thanks
I
for the
love it.
opportunity
I
again.
think we
Yeah,
should be in ceremony at some point together, all three of us, some kind of ceremony,
sure.
whatever it is, whether it's fire, water, prayer,
We can
medicine.
try. We
They're
can
all
figure out
medicine,
something.
right?
We can figure out something that'll be just perfect for all of us.
Yeah, exactly. This is ceremony right here.
Incidentally, like just doing like threshold doses, and
Yeah,
sitting by a fire, just like a little, getting into the field is very powerful.
very.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So beautiful. Thank you so much for having me again.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I love your storytelling. I love your wisdom. Thank you for bringing prayer again and centering us in our hearts. Really powerful work.
Yeah. It's been a journey for me in the last month with this. It's been amazing. It just keeps on opening.
Wow.
So yeah, it's like it's the creation field. So enjoy it.
Thank you, Stuart. Thank you,
Yeah.
Michaela.